The Christmas storm hit without warning. What had begun as a light dusting of snow in the morning quickly turned into a full-blown blizzard by evening. The wind howled through the narrow streets of the small town, rattling windows and whipping the fresh snow into blinding sheets. Cars struggled to navigate the slick roads, their tires slipping and sliding over hidden patches of ice. For Maria, driving home had been a nightmare from the start. She had taken a shortcut through the outskirts of town, hoping to avoid the main roads, but the storm had grown stronger than she anticipated. Her small sedan skidded violently as she tried to regain control. The headlights reflected off the thick snowflakes, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Heart pounding, she braked, but the car slid sideways, finally coming to a stop on a narrow, snow-covered path near the edge of a ranch. She exhaled shakily, realizing she couldn't go any further. Every instinct screamed to keep moving, but the storm was relentless, the cold biting deep into her skin. She wrapped her coat tighter around her and tried to gather her bearings. Through the swirling white haze, Maria noticed faint lights in the distance. At first, she thought they were just reflections off the snow, but as she stared, they began to take shape, like tiny beacons flickering through the darkness. Her heart leapt. Hope. Maybe someone was nearby. She stumbled forward, her boots sinking into the snow with each step. The wind bit at her face, and her eyelashes froze with tiny ice crystals, but she forced herself to keep moving. Memories of her childhood winters flashed before her eyes, holiday lights on houses, laughter echoing down icy streets, the smell of pine and cinnamon in the air. She clung to those memories, imagining warmth and safety just ahead. Every step felt heavier than the last, but she whispered a quiet prayer, hoping someone would notice her in the storm. The snowstorm showed no mercy, yet the small glimmer of light guided her forward like a promise. Hours, or maybe only minutes, seemed to pass as she pushed through the storm. Her fingers were numb, her coat damp from the relentless snow, and her boots were filled with cold slush. Yet something deep inside her refused to give up. Then, as she rounded a bend in the path, the lights became brighter, more solid. Shapes of lanterns, lined carefully along a path, appeared through the storm, each one casting a warm, golden glow onto the snow. Her pulse quickened. Someone had prepared this, someone was waiting to help. Relief mingled with exhaustion, and tears blurred her vision as she stumbled toward the welcoming glow. Maria's breath came in sharp, frosty gasps, but for the first time since the storm had started, she felt that she might just make it. Somewhere ahead, behind those flickering lights, warmth awaited. Shelter, safety, perhaps even kindness. She pushed forward, step by step, guided by the small lights that promised refuge from the harsh winter night. Jacob had been standing on the porch of his ranch for hours, watching the storm rage across the open fields. The wind tore through the trees, shaking branches heavy with snow, and the sky seemed to collapse under the weight of the swirling white. He had already checked the weather alerts 3 times and secured the barn doors, knowing that the storm could turn dangerous in an instant. But tonight, something unusual caught his eye, a faint, struggling figure moving through the blizzard, barely visible against the snow-covered landscape. Instinctively, Jacob knew someone was in trouble. He didn't hesitate. He ran inside the house, grabbing lanterns from the shelf, each one polished and ready. The flicker of firelight promised guidance through the darkness, and he placed them carefully along the snowed-in path from the edge of the road to his front door. One by one, he lit each lantern, the flames casting warm, steady glows that cut through the storm's chaos. Their soft light shimmered on the snow, creating a trail, a lifeline through the relentless wind. Outside, Maria spotted the lights, her heart leaping in relief. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, the storm too wild, the snow too thick. But as she trudged closer, she saw the full line of glowing lanterns, each one like a beacon calling her forward. Every step toward them brought warmth into her frozen limbs, every flicker of light guiding her closer to safety. She stumbled, almost falling, but the lanterns seemed to pull her up, whispering silently that she wasn't alone, that help awaited her just ahead. The cold gnawed at her, frost forming along the edges of her scarf and coat, but the sight of those lights gave her courage. She thought of her childhood winters, of Christmas lights on streets she used to walk as a girl, of the cozy warmth of her mother's kitchen. Memories of safety and comfort surged within her, strengthening her resolve to reach the end of the glowing path. Each lantern was more than just light, it was hope, a promise that someone cared enough to guide her through the storm. Jacob watched carefully as the figure drew closer, his eyes squinting through the snow. He saw her shiver, saw her struggle to keep moving against the wind. Yet there was determination in her movements, a quiet courage that impressed him. He stayed on the porch, ready to help the moment she reached the last lantern, ensuring she would step safely onto the cleared walkway of his ranch. Finally, Maria emerged from the swirling snow, her body trembling from cold but her spirit lifted by the guiding lights. She had made it. The warmth from the lanterns seemed to chase the storm away, if only a little. Relief washed over her as she approached the porch, and she dared a small smile, grateful beyond words. The harshness of the storm had driven her into danger, but it had also led her to this unexpected sanctuary, a place of safety and kindness in the middle of the wild winter night. Maria stepped onto the ranch porch, her boots sinking slightly into the fresh snow that had drifted around the steps. She shivered violently, her fingers stiff and her cheeks tinged a pale blue from the biting cold. The lanterns, golden light spilled around her, creating a halo that seemed to separate her from the relentless storm. For a long moment, she simply stood there, trembling, barely able to believe that she had made it. Then, the door opened, and Jacob appeared, wrapped in a thick woolen coat, his face etched with concern. "Come inside," he said gently, his voice steady and warm. Without waiting for a reply, he stepped aside, guiding her into the ranch's welcoming glow. The door closed behind her, shutting out the furious storm. Inside, the air was rich with the scent of burning wood, mingled with faint traces of pine and cinnamon. A large fireplace crackled with flames, sending warmth through the room, chasing the chill from her bones. Maria exhaled, relief flooding her exhausted body, and allowed herself to sink onto a chair near the fire. Jacob wrapped another blanket around her shoulders, thick and soft, its heat immediately soothing her frozen limbs. She clutched it around her tightly, her teeth still chattering, and he handed her a steaming mug of hot cocoa. The rich chocolate aroma filled the air, and she brought it to her lips, savoring the warmth as it spread down her throat. Each sip felt like a small miracle, a comforting contrast to the freezing wind she had just endured. For a moment, neither spoke. Maria's eyes scanned the room, taking in the rustic charm of the ranch. Wooden beams crossed the ceiling, and the walls were adorned with family photos, each frame telling a story of past Christmases. A small Christmas tree in the corner twinkled with soft, colorful lights, ornaments hanging delicately from its branches. It felt like stepping into a memory, into a scene she had longed for but rarely experienced in her adult life. Jacob finally spoke again, offering a small smile. "You're safe now," he said simply. No judgment, no questions, just a fact she could cling to. Maria nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Words felt inadequate, but the gratitude in her eyes spoke volumes. She had been terrified in the storm, every step toward the ranch a test of endurance, yet now, surrounded by warmth and kindness, that fear began to melt away. Outside, the storm continued to rage, wind howling and snow swirling, but inside, the ranch was a sanctuary. Maria felt the tension in her shoulders ease, the icy grip of fear loosening with each passing moment. For the first time that night, she could rest, could let herself be cared for without shame or hesitation. Laughter and quiet conversation soon filled the room as Jacob shared stories of winters past, filling the space with life and warmth. In that small cabin, surrounded by the glow of the fire and the safety of another human being, Maria realized she had found something rare, a place where she belonged, even if only for the night. The storm outside was fierce and relentless, but here, she was home. The night deepened, and the storm outside showed no sign of slowing. Snow swirled against the windows, drifting in thick sheets that made the world beyond the ranch almost unrecognizable. Yet inside, the cabin felt like a world apart, warm, safe, and alive. Maria sat near the fire, the thick wool blanket wrapped around her shoulders, and allowed herself to finally breathe. For the first time in hours, or perhaps days, she felt completely at ease. Her hands, once numb from the cold, were now cozy, and her cheeks had regained some color. She took a slow sip of cocoa, savoring the heat as it filled her from the inside out. Jacob sat across from her, a quiet presence that radiated calm. He told stories of past Christmases spent on the ranch, family gatherings long ago, snowball fights that ended in laughter, nights filled with music and warmth. Maria listened, occasionally laughing, occasionally just nodding, letting the memories he shared wash over her like sunlight through clouds. She realized that she had been so focused on surviving the storm that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to simply exist in a place of comfort and care. Through the frosted window panes, she watched the snow settle on the fields, sparkling under the faint glow of the lanterns outside. Every flake seemed to shimmer with magic, a silent reminder that nature, though harsh and unforgiving, could also be breathtakingly beautiful. Maria's heart swelled with gratitude, not only for her safety but for the unexpected kindness that had guided her here. The storm, which had once threatened to overwhelm her, now felt like the instrument that had led her to this sanctuary. As the hours passed, Maria felt an unusual sense of peace. The storm outside, though still powerful, no longer seemed menacing. Instead, it was a backdrop to a night that had quietly transformed into something extraordinary. The fire's glow, the warmth of the cabin, the comforting presence of another human being, all of it combined to create a moment that felt larger than life. She realized that Christmas, with all its traditions and stories, was not just about gifts or decorations, but about human connection, hope, and unexpected miracles. When dawn finally broke, the world outside had changed. The storm had eased, leaving the ranch surrounded by pristine, sparkling snow. Trees glistened, and icicles hung like delicate crystal ornaments from the roof. Maria stepped onto the porch, breathing in the crisp morning air. She looked back at the cabin, at the warm glow that had protected her through the night, and felt a sense of wonder. Somehow, she knew this night would stay with her forever, a Christmas miracle she had never anticipated but would never forget. Though she would eventually continue her journey, the memory of the guiding lights, the warm fire, and the kindness of a stranger would remain. The ranch had become more than a refuge, it had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the harshest storms, light and warmth could be found if one was brave enough to follow them. And as Maria took her first steps into the sparkling winter morning, she carried with her a renewed faith in the magic of Christmas and the quiet miracles that make life extraordinary.